عندي 106 سنين 106 سنين الحمد لله.
Hello and welcome to Meet Us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. And we're glad you're here today with us to take a new look at the old city of Jerusalem. Now, most of the time when someone goes to Jerusalem, they'll go and see the Western Wall, they'll look at the Roman Cardo, go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and to the Al-Aqsa compound, look at the Dome of the Rock. That's all fabulous and worth seeing. Instead, today we're taking a nuanced look at the old city through the eyes of Matthew Teller, the author of 9 Quarters of Jerusalem, a new biography of the old city. It comes out on March 17th, 2022, published by Profile Books of London. Matthew, we welcome you.
Thank you, Anisa. What an introduction. That's so nice. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Let me just say that among his other publications, the BBC, the Financial Times, the Guardian, National Geographic Traveler, Wanderlust, and Aramco World. And this is my dog-eared copy of the Aramco World magazine 2018, June, with Matthew's marvelous article about the Abraham Path Initiative and the wonderful trails in Southwest Asia that we've helped to catalyze. So Matthew, you have been a longtime friend of the Abraham Path. What attracts you to this organization?
What attracts me? That's an interesting question. What attracts me is the big idea, the big story. That's what got me. First of all, I first heard about the path and first walked the path in 2007 in Turkey, in southeastern Turkey. And that was the first time I heard about it. That was the first time I heard the founder, William Ury, talk about it. But that big idea of using walking tied into this constellation of ideas around Abraham and Ibrahim that go through all the cultures in this part of the world was so compelling. And I've been so lucky to be able to sort of stick with it, to walk it in Turkey, to walk the path in Jordan. I walked the path in Palestine, as you saw from that article that you talked about. It's been a mainstay with me for quite a few years.
And we appreciate it. And, you know, full transparency, he writes about us and we get a chance to encourage knowledge about and information about your upcoming book. What was the inspiration for this book? So many stories, fiction and nonfiction, about Jerusalem. What was the inspiration here, Matthew?
That's really true. I've been very lucky to be going to Jerusalem most of my life since I was a little kid. I first went in 1980, which is an awfully long time ago. But it was the experience of walking in the old city and looking at the mismatch that I saw between the maps that we all use, the guidebooks and the maps and the internet guides that we have, and the reality of what life was like in the old city, how I felt life was in the old city. That's the old city of Jerusalem. That's the shape of the old city inside the walls. The walls are 400 something years old, built by Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Sultan. But this idea that the city is divided into these 4 quarters, the Christian quarter and the Muslim quarter and the Jewish quarter and the Armenian quarter, although the Armenians are also Christians, so already there's a flaw in the logic there to start with. But if you look at that, you sort of get the impression that it's like international border. It's like a map of the US showing the difference between states with a state line in between. And if you're walking around, as I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners have been, there isn't a border. There is no point at which you can tell that you're crossing from the Christian quarter to the Muslim quarter. The Jewish quarter is somewhat different because of the history of the old city, and particularly the history of 1948 and 1967. But what I wanted to try and do was to understand where this idea, where the story of the 4 quarters came from, And that's it's probably too long for us to go into at this stage, but it's a long story which I was able to research into when it came about and who developed it and why it has stayed with us. Broadly, it was the British. So in the medieval period, there's a particular historian called Mujir ad-Din, who was a Jerusalemite historian who wrote in 1495. He counted 18 quarters in Jerusalem, in his city. There have been historians who've tracked even more. There were 39 quarters in Jerusalem in the 13th and 14th centuries. These were organic. These were quarters which had developed, if you like to call them, I mean, quarters is also a tricky word in English. You could call them neighborhoods. These 18 or 39 would have been small areas where a few families maybe would have shared a series of courtyards around a particular street or alleyway. And they would all have been, jumbled up together side by side. There has always been a pattern of population. Christians have always settled in and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which you can see on this map. Muslims have always settled in and around the walls of Al-Aqsa, which you can see. Jews have always settled in that area close to the Western Wall.
We tend to settle with our neighbors, don't we? We tend to settle with people who are
absolutely.
Color, similar income level, similar religious practices, similar diets.
Absolutely so. But what we find in Jerusalem in particular is that these quarters, so-called, or neighborhoods, were not rigidly defined. They were not defined with these very hard lines and color codes and as if you can't move from one to the other. So there was a lot of mixing. It was very diverse.
Who color-coded them?
It's a really good question. I think it may be the people from your and my profession, the Western media, I think would be my idea, maybe. Or people wanting just to try and get a handle on a place that's very complicated and very diverse and very mixed, very hard to understand. And there's a longer story in there, but that's essentially what the British were doing in the 19th century when they came up with these idea of these four ethno-religiously divided sectarian quarters, and it stuck with us, unfortunately.
We try so hard to compartmentalize and simplify and put people in drawers and boxes and ways that we can understand them, and we really can't. I mean, the more work we do with the Abraham Path Initiative, and I too was a reporter for 20 years, it's the nuance that's so interesting to me.
It's the people. It's getting down. If you can do it, if it's possible to do, is to get down to the grassroots. That's also what I want to. Sorry, go on. The people and their culture. Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I'm coming from. The point of this book was much less to try. I mean, I have a platform here. I'm white. I'm Western. I'm middle-aged. I'm male. I have all these privileges. What I wanted to try and do was to use that to try and amplify these voices of the people who live there, who live in the midst of these so-called mythical four quarters, and to try and give their voices. They've been talking, but we've not been listening, to try and give them a bit of amplification.
Fantastic.
I hope I've done it. I don't know if I've done it, but you'll be able to tell me when the book is out.
I'm looking forward to it. Matt, we've done some videotaping in Jerusalem that approximates a bit of a walk from the Damascus Gate through some sections, and we want to share this walk with our audience today. And you and I, and you in particular, will be the commentators. What are we seeing?
Okay.
And who is there? So where are we?
This is the Damascus Gate. Yeah. So this is, if you like, this is the main entrance into the old city. We're just outside. This is the main entrance into the old city from downtown East Jerusalem. You could say it's called in English Damascus Gate because I don't think the camera is going to, but if the camera does turn around, that street eventually, if you keep walking behind us for a long way and a long time, you'll get to Damascus. That's the start of the road north out of Jerusalem. But the Arabic name for this gate has a quite different approach. You quite often find that the way that Arabic views the city is often quite different, especially from the way English views it and also from the way Hebrew views it. The Arabic name is Bab al-Amud, which is gate of the column. Amud is a column. And just about here. We've gone through, if you saw, we went through a dogleg, which was a defensive dogleg when Suleiman the Magnificent built these walls and this gate, completed it in 1541. That was to slow down an attacking army, so they'd have to make sharp turns. But just about here, where we are now, would have been in Roman times, like way down, because the ground level has risen, but way down beneath our feet would have been a column. And it would have been a column, a kind of a column of victory. And on top of the column, we guess, would have been a statue perhaps of the Roman emperor. But there's not been a column there for 1,000 years or more. And yet Arabic holds on to that idea, that historical memory is encoded in the name of the gate in Arabic.
And we're walking here through a market, a souk in Arabic, where you can see people selling your vegetables. You hear voices making deals, offering prices, you know, price, you can't beat this price, can't beat this price.
It's lovely. These ladies who sit by the feet of the shoppers as they're going past, these ladies tend to come from the villages around, often the villages around Bethlehem or outside Jerusalem. And they'll come in, they're farming or they're cultivating their own herbs and crops, and they'll come in and they'll settle down on the stones and they'll sell directly to the people. It's the Israeli municipal law deems it as illegal, so often they're under pressure from the municipal enforcement teams who try and move them on. But women have been selling on the streets of Jerusalem since at least the 14th century with documentary evidence. So I think they're probably going to be there for a while yet, I would think.
I noticed that there's not a lot of mask wearing. I understand that there's no law right now that lifted those rules.
Yeah.
Wearing masks outside, but inside it is still required.
And what's striking as well is just, it looks busy to us now. This is perhaps like 1/10 of the number of people that may usually have been in and around these streets. It's been a very, very tough time, the whole pandemic, in the old city. And the tourism has been cleaned out almost entirely, but also the local economy is also struggling as well. So these streets are, they may look busy and they may look thriving, but they're half empty, you know?
There's a fork at the bottom of that alley, that area with the market, and we took the right-hand road. We're going to make a bit of a circle. We'll show the map as we come out of this walk. We have a map to show you that describes this section, so our audience can place themselves.
Yeah, down. I can sort of do it with my hands on the screen. As you come down from Damascus Gate, then there's a fork at the bottom. A left-hand fork is Al-Wad Street, which is the street of the valley, and that goes down, eventually reaching down towards Al-Aqsa and the Western Wall, and that's the floor of a valley which is now filled in again because of the centuries of rubble passing by, but it stands between two hills, the hill on which Al-Aqsa and the temples sit and the hill of the city. That's the valley there. We've gone on the other side, we've gone along the ridge road, which is this road here where we're walking. This is Souk Khan al-Zayt. Khan is a caravanserai. Zayt is oil, specifically olive oil. So along here used to be olive oil soap factories and all sorts of olive oil processing. And this is also, we've just reached there, Khan al-Zayt, right there. Just opposite there where we looked, that is the 7th Station of the Cross. This is also part of the Via Dolorosa, which is the street of pain or the way of suffering, which is the route in legend that Jesus walked carrying the cross. So there's a route going through the old city, first station, second station, third, up to the 14th station, and it passes often through these very, very busy shopping streets.
And we're actually going the opposite direction down.
We're going against the flow, exactly, yeah.
Toward the 6th station.
So we've just gone past the 6th. The 7th was at the top of that street. We've gone past the 6th. Here, right in front of us, here on the corner, is the 5th station. And then the Via Dolorosa will continue to the left and then to the right. But normally there would be crowds of tourists and pilgrims crowded around each one of these stations and walking and singing and, enjoying this experience of the journey of a lifetime of following in the footsteps of Jesus. The place is empty. It's a very, very difficult time for the people who live and work inside the old city at the moment. This pandemic has undercut, among other things, has undercut the economy very, very badly.
And we've just taken a look at Abu Shukri, which is a rather famous restaurant to stop in on. You know Abu Shukri, huh?
Absolutely. It's legendary, going back decades and decades, as being one of, if not the best place to get hummus and also falafel in the old city as well. So we're back on Al Wad Street. This is straight ahead of us, is the turning that we took at Damascus Gate. Directly behind us is the route to Al-Aqsa and also down to the Western Wall as well. And on the right, we're just passing, that's the third station and the fourth station side by side of the cross. This is the Armenian Catholic Patriarchate building. And there's this stretch of temporary shade over this junction, because this is often where the Israeli police will stand. There they are, just behind their barricades there. Opposite, what's a juice bar and also a very famous restaurant, Basti, which has also been there for decades and decades and decades, is now a pizzeria. And then just to the right, past the police barricades, is the continuation of the Via Dolorosa, which goes up to the second and then the first stations, and then out of the city through the Eastern Gate. Directly in front of us is, I feel like a tour guide. This is like one of those things you get on an open top bus or something, you know, where the guide is. This is the Austrian Hospice, which was built by the emissaries of the Bishop of Vienna in the 1850s, 1860s, I think, and is still a very, very popular place. You can stay there. You can. They have rooms for rent, and they also have a little cafe, well, quite a big cafe, for Black Forest Gâteau and Sachet Torte and all these fancy Viennese cakes.
And a lovely view of the city from the top.
From the top, the roof is very nice. Yeah, up there. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
So someday when we do a live online tour from Jerusalem, we hope to be able to show the city, the view of the city from the top.
That'd be marvelous.
As much as we'd love to be there in person and walk, Matthew, the prognosis is iffy. So this is our best alternative.
It is. Right now. It is. But this is lovely. This takes me right back there. This is, you know, I can smell it. I can feel it. I can taste it. It's like, this is a real treat to be able to see this. Oh, here you go. Talk about tasting.
Yes. Beautiful.
So these are little dough balls drenched in syrup, which are also very, very tasty as well. And there's plenty of sweets and treats to eat going through the soup.
There are no lack, at least for the folks of means, of goodies to consume.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Well, that was really, it was a fun visit back, because for me, the Damascus Gate is my home gate when I go to Jerusalem. I stay at a hotel near there called the Jerusalem Hotel, which is run by a good friend, Raed Zadeh. And
it was an inspiration for my book, I should add as well. This all links together very nicely.
Yeah.
The book came out of conversations I had with Raed and a couple other friends as well, years ago, 9 years ago now. And his idea to try and write about the people of the old city and to focus in on the people and to try and get those stories and to try and tell the city's history and background from the bottom instead of from the top.
From the bottom instead of the top, which is a reality we don't often get. We often get those four quarters and the major sites, and there's so much to learn. There's so much richness and soulfulness that we can glean when we get off the beaten track.
Absolutely. Yeah. It to me, it feels like the heart of the city. This is the point. There isn't much of a point to visiting a place like the old city of Jerusalem if all you're going to do is to focus on the stones. The stones may be important, but so often you look back in literature from the past as well, people have viewed that the residents, the people who live and work in the place, as being tangential, or a difficulty or an obstruction or something to be avoided, something to be got around. And that attitude unfortunately still persists today. It's not about the stones, it's about the people. The people matter more even than the stones do.
Yes. We're very fortunate to be joined today by Mahmoud Muna, who is one of the many extraordinary people of the old city of Jerusalem. Mahmoud is of the famed Jerusalem Educational Bookshop and that dazzling tiny little bookshop at the American Colony Hotel. Mahmoud, would you join us?
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Pleasure to see you. So I know that I was wondering how you reacted when Matthew came and said, I'm writing this book. Can we make you a part of it?
Well, I still didn't read the book, so it's all nice and surprising for me to.
It's okay. No one's read the book yet, Matt.
Looking forward to for March and see what came out. Look, I mean, it's not the first book on Jerusalem, but it's probably the first one to look from a very interesting angle that's kind of ignore. I don't know if I'm right, but my message to Matthew was like, let me suggest to you that you write a different book that is not usually from the angle of the usual protagonist of Jerusalem, the usual names, the usual faces, because that has been done before. And let's also focus on the hidden sides of Jerusalem. Jerusalem as someone locals see it, and Matthew being really lucky, and we've been lucky to have Matthew here for long periods of time and have really good connections with the local, that he could have that access. We suffer a little bit from Jerusalem as people who lives in here, but we also often misrepresented on books that's either written by someone who spent a very little time or someone who's paying very little attention to the people and to the culture of Jerusalem and focus mostly on the stones or the biblical story. That was my advice to Matthew, and that's what I hoped he would have achieved. It is often disappointing to read books about Jerusalem that ignores the real life and the daily routine of the people of Jerusalem, who makes Jerusalem, whoever are these people, whoever they are. And of course, they're changing along the civilizations. But the city does change, and that change is through the face and the words and the works of the people who live there. But unfortunately, most of the time, people are fixated on stones and biblical or archaeological history and so on. And by doing that, a lot is being missed.
I think that's really true. And, you know, your input, your guidance and your support, you know, from the beginning has been awesome. And I just hope that I can do the place justice and do the people justice as well. When the book does come out, tell me and tell us actually a little bit about what are the literary culture in Jerusalem? What's going on? What are people writing about? What are people reading about?
Yeah, okay. So Jerusalem, literally and culturally, are in transition period, because on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, Jerusalem have lost some of its shine, actually, if we want to be honest and direct. Tel Aviv, on the Israeli side, Tel Aviv is taking away a lot of the culture and art and literature from the Israeli Jerusalem, from West Jerusalem. And on the east, a lot is going to the West Bank and Ramallah, of course, due to restrictions and due to many political realities. It's easier to do cultural events in Ramallah and so on. So actually, Jerusalem in a transition period where we're trying to keep what we have started and to initiate new things, but really is trying to defend, if you like, Jerusalem from the new attacking cultural literature capitals behind us. So it is becoming a tradition here at the bookshop, for example, that we do the events first and foremost in Jerusalem, then we move to Ramallah. Although the Ramallah's event will be bigger, but we want to make a point that we start in Jerusalem in that way. The last literature adventure that happened in Jerusalem, and I was happy to be part of it, is Granta magazine. I don't know if Matthew knows what this is.
Yeah, I saw about it. I saw the announcements. Yeah, but go on, tell the story. Tell the story.
Well, 2 years ago, we've been approached by Granta UK to publish the first Granta Arabic. And we took this with a lot of responsibility and lots of consideration. It is a huge task to publish the first Granta Arabic on behalf of the Arab world, on behalf of a very fragmented Arabs and Arab worlds, politically and literaturally as well. To take that on, but there's also a great opportunity to realign Jerusalem and to put it again on the center of the Arab world. So for the magazine to come out from an independent bookshop in Jerusalem is a great symbolic, if you like. So what we did is we made a call for the Arab world, but really not to the Arabs, actually, not to the Arab world. We have great 30% of our contributors are actually in diaspora, Syrian, Palestinian, Egyptians, and so on, who lives in around the world. originally or has been gone through the refugee experience. And we got a lot of entries, 1,200 in total, and then we had to go through them and choose the best 20. And make sure that we have gender representation and we have geographical representation, and yet keep it true to what is Granta is, which is a magazine for new writing, creative literature by emerging new writers. So, and again, this is came out 2-3 weeks ago now, maybe a month, and it's again in the hands of people, and we started to receive some responses now from people to see how good or bad, or have we achieved our aim. But for us, this is again another kind of an opportunity really to say is that Jerusalem is the center of the Arab world. Jerusalem does speak Arabic, it looks Arabic, it tastes Arabic, it smells Arabic, and there's nothing going to change that. Not the Israeli policies, and not downgrading Arabic as an official language or whatever Israel is trying to do. Arabic will remain one of the main languages of Jerusalem, if not is the main one. And it's going to be the epicenter, the focal point of the Arab world as well. And not just that, is also the focal point of creative, cutting edge, new, emerging, young literature.
You are quite a spokesperson, Mahmoud, for Jerusalem. Passion.
It's great to hear. It's fantastic to hear. I love it.
Quite much. But it's interesting that you say, it is an Arab city, but it is an Arab city with a diverse population. Not everybody is an indigenous Arab speaker, for example. There are a lot of different minority groups who've come to Jerusalem from other places because of it being an epicenter, certainly.
Sure. We often refer to Jerusalem as a city of strangers because it does welcome everyone, and that's I hope the number one thing that you feel in Jerusalem, even before the fact that it is a holy city. It's actually a welcoming city, and it has been, and I hope it will always be, a city that welcomes strangers who hopefully soon enough will feel like they are at home. Nevertheless, it is important to also remember that Jerusalem have been every civilization have tried to control and occupy and run Jerusalem, and it is the turn of history. I think if I could close my remarks with this, I mean, it was nice to see this video you shared. This is a crazy thing to say, but I actually do it. I walk in Jerusalem usually on a Friday afternoon when the city is very quiet, and I try to speak to the stones in Jerusalem, and I try to have a conversation with them. And I was like, if the stones can talk in Jerusalem, what would they say? And I think in the last encounter, let's put it that way, with the stones of Jerusalem, I hear them laughing because they have seen all the civilization coming and going, trying to control Jerusalem, and they go and come and go. So you only have two options in Jerusalem. You either destroy and shed blood, or you contribute to its progress and its flourishing future. And I hope some people in Jerusalem are doing that.
Thank you, Mahmoud.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad you suggested we bring him in. That's really the heart of the Abraham Path initiative too, is looking at that. Where can we connect, and where can we turn strangers into friends? Because at the end of the day, really, isn't that what we all want?
That connection is really, really important. That human connection, that's what we've lost in the last couple of years with the pandemic as well. That's why all of us around the world are feeling under stress and feeling under pressure, and mental health is suffering around the world because we've lost that human connection.
Yeah. Why don't you read about Amun Salim?
Would love to. Here, I'm going to share.
Talk about minority communities. And
exactly. So that is the cover of Amun's book. Amun is a really extraordinary person. I was very, very lucky to meet her and talk to her. She was very welcoming and very forthcoming. She defines herself as a gypsy. Gypsy is a word which it's kind of weighted with baggage in this part of the world, where I am in Europe and also North America as well. But she chooses to define as a gypsy. That's her prerogative. So I'm going with gypsy. But the gypsies of Europe are not the same as the gypsies of the Middle East. So there's a bit which I wrote about in the introduction to the gypsies of the Middle East, which I'm just going to read a little bit from, just to give an idea. And this is focused on Amun and also taken from Amun's memoir, which is right there. The girl dropped out of school when her mother died. It was a heart attack, they said, so young, only 37. The girl was about 7 and didn't understand what a heart attack was. Suddenly, her father had become a widower, taking care of 9 children, 5 boys and 4 girls. The girl's grandma helped raise her. Grandma was very kind, but she died only 3 years later. And after that, it was much harder. The girl was sad. All of them were sad. It left a big impact. This wasn't the life they wanted. The girl is grown. Her name is Slim. She is from the women of Dom, born into a family that has lived in Jerusalem for more than 200 years. Dom is what Amun's people call themselves. Their roots, like the roots of almost all the gypsies, lie in India. In that country, a low-status caste of people who travel and who earn a living from music and craft making was and still is known as Domba. In irregular waves of migration beginning roughly 1500 years ago, some Domba people began to move westwards. Some reached Armenia and the Caucasus around the 11th century. They are the Lom, who now speak Lomavran. Some continued on into Eastern and Central Europe, and some of those kept moving, reaching Northern and Western Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. And they are the Rom, or the Roma, who now speak Romani. And some stayed in Turkey and Iran and Central Asia and the Arab lands of the Middle East, traveling independently or forcibly relocated from place to place by rulers or invading armies. They are the Dom, and they speak Amun's language, Domari. Down the centuries, the Dom reappear here and there, always on the edge of things, brought to entertain the Shah of Persia as dancers and musicians, exiled first to the Mediterranean coast, then to the islands of Greece to be kept well away from the power centers in Damascus and Baghdad, employed as acrobats, fortune tellers and bear handlers in Constantinople, scraping a living in Cyprus, selling nails and handmade belts. Today, there are maybe 2 million Dom, most in Turkey and Iran. There are sizable communities in Jordan and Egypt, and there used to be many in Syria before the war. Roughly 20,000 Dom live across Gaza and the West Bank, Amun estimates, plus maybe 1,000 or 1,500 in Jerusalem, about half of them inside the old city. The Dom are Muslim, bar a very few Christians, and they speak Arabic, and they live within Palestinian communities, but Amun is very clear. They are neither Palestinian nor Israeli. They are Dom.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Matthew. I'm going to move us through a little bit. What I'd like you to do, Matthew, put up the map so we can see where we walked before, just briefly, and then show us the walk we're about to take from the Jaffa Gate.
This is the Damascus Gate. And what we did in that video was we walked in from the outside, we walked in through there. That's where the Roman column would have been. And we turned right and we walked along that market street to the 7th station, which is on that crossroads there. And then we came down there, which is part of the Via Dolorosa, to Al-Wad Street, which is this long street here. And then we went up there and we stopped outside the Austrian Hospice, which is that block, which you can see right there.
Right. Okay. And now we're going to go from the Jaffa Gate. Tell us what we're going to see.
So as I said, the Damascus Gate in the north there is the main entrance from sort of downtown East Jerusalem. Jaffa Gate, which is over here, is what you might call the main entrance from West Jerusalem. So as I understand it, what you would do is you would come in here. And I think what we're going to do in this video is just to sort of just do a little circle around the Citadel, which is that fortified point just inside the gateway there.
Right. If we were going to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where would we go?
That's right there.
That's over there. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a walking route. I mean, there's tons of walking routes, but you could go in and then you go into the souk a little bit, and then you would turn up and you would cross this souk area here, and then you would come into the church like that.
Yeah, and we can see how it's close there to the Via Dolorosa.
Yeah, exactly so. And then over here, that's the Dome of the Rock, and that is the mosque that we usually call Al-Aqsa. And the Western Wall is just about there. This is a British map from about 1945, I think. So although it shows where everything is, nothing has moved since 1945. The arrangement of the streets and whatever is slightly different now, but that's okay. That shows where we are.
I'm going to move us right into the short walk through the Jaffa Gate, and then we will go meet someone in the Armenian community. So we are approaching the Jaffa Gate. As Matt pointed out, it's the western side, and the highway to the right there is pretty much the line that separates Old and East and West Jerusalem, right? Old and New.
Yeah, kind of, but it's close. It goes around to form Route 1. That's the road which goes behind us to Jaffa, which is why this is called Jaffa Gate in English. And in front of us, that same road goes down to Bethlehem and then down to Hebron. And the name in Arabic of this gate is Baba Khalil, the Hebron Gate. So again, English and Arabic will have different names relating to slightly different concepts.
So where are we now? We've come through the gate.
Mm-hmm. We're just inside the gate. To the right is the Citadel. This is this fortified point, which has been fortified for 2,000 years, even more than 2,000 years. Rome's 10th Legion camped somewhere in this area here where the fortifications now are. Those are built at the same time or refortified by Suleiman when he built and rebuilt the walls in the 1530s and the 1540s. And this is the point. If you remember that map of the quarters, this is a point on one of those division lines. So to the left of us is the Christian quarter. And to the right of us and ahead of us in this shot is the Armenian quarter. Where's the line? I don't know, and I wouldn't like to guess. If you remember a while back, 20 years ago, the President Clinton's peace plan for Jerusalem involved dividing the old city along the quarters line. The Christian and the Muslim quarter was to be part of Palestine, and the Armenian quarter was to be joined with the Jewish quarter and part of Israel. So where we just walked would have been, I don't know, an international frontier zone of some kind. Thank heavens that vision of peace didn't come to pass.
Talk a little bit about the Armenian Quarter and the community. We're going to be meeting a good friend of yours in a moment. And
Sure.
I'd like you to make the introduction to Hagop Karakashian.
Hagop is a lovely guy. You'll see. I've had a chance to see this little video. It's wonderful. He can tell the story much better than I can, but his family is intimately related to the urban culture, the visual urban culture of the old city. And the Armenian community as a whole, as you'll see also from his talk and his little video that he gives, have contributed massively to arts and culture in Jerusalem as a wide city, not just the old city in particular. The Armenians have been pivotal in the development of photography, in particular for more than a century, 150 years or more. And the ceramics that Hagop is concerned with, you'll see, has been a core feature which they've brought fresh to Jerusalem, to the culture of Jerusalem.
The old city of Jerusalem is made of many neighborhoods, diverse communities, and narrow, winding streets. And there's one thing that helps everyone know right where they are: the street signs.
My father started working on the project in 1965, 1966. The Jordanians were in charge of Jerusalem at the time. He started making them in Arabic and English. This is my father here, and this was the mayor of Jerusalem, the Jordanian mayor, Mr. Rawh al-Khatib. This picture was taken in 1966, the day they put the signs up in Arabic and English.
In 1967, the Israelis took over, and the street signs had to be changed.
Now the Israelis, the first mayor of Jerusalem was Teddy Kollek. He asked my father to add the Hebrew name on top. So if you walk around the old city now, you'll see the original signs with the Hebrew on top, with the lines separating the Arabic and English. So my father and uncle, they left their mark on the walls of Jerusalem.
Hagop's father was the second generation of Armenian artists to leave their mark in the old city. His grandfather came to Jerusalem from Turkey in 1919, invited by the British government to help renovate ceramic tiles at the Dome of the Rock.
The British governor, Sir Ronald Storrs, invited 3 Armenian artists from the city of Kütahya in Turkey to come and carry out the entire renovation. My grandfather was one of the painters. His name was Megerdich Karakashian, and they started making sample tiles for the project. The samples came out very nice, but eventually the British first ran out of money And then the Waqf said, we don't like the idea of Armenian Christians to be working on one of our holiest sites. We prefer Muslims to do the work. So the project was cancelled, but the three artists, including my grandfather, couldn't go back to Turkey because of the Armenian genocide.
They stayed in Jerusalem, making Armenian pottery instead. The Armenian designs grew from Turkish roots and added visual elements from local mosaics, churches, manuscripts, and flora and fauna.
Armenian pottery in Jerusalem didn't exist before 1919, and it became a part of the history of local Jerusalem art. I go to antique shops all over Jerusalem and Israel, and I see pieces like this for sale. This was one of the vases which my grandfather painted. It says Palestine. This was done before 1948. Now, when I see pieces like this being sold on eBay or in antique shops, or even when I visit people's homes, I feel very proud. I feel the connection very strongly.
The city's arts and cultures, along with its street signs, help maintain harmony among the diverse populations that call Jerusalem home.
I'm also proud of the street name signs which my father did. This is one of his extras which he didn't use. So whenever I walk to work in the morning, I look up at the walls and I see his work. It feels good.
Such a charming man.
He's lovely. He's lovely. He was very welcoming to me as well. He's very forthcoming. And the story of his family and of the families connected with his family that came from Kütahya at that time in the middle of the genocide to develop this new culture in Jerusalem. Just extraordinary. Amazing story.
Lots of courage, resilience, resourcefulness.
Really.
Which are some of the characteristics I think that Mahmoud was referring to, talking about the peoples of this
absolutely
city.
So. Absolutely so. I mean, I'm very aware, when I'm talking to these people and I'm sort of swanning in from outside, I have, as I said earlier on, I have privileges galore. And I'm very aware that I can never be an insider. I can never be a Jerusalemite. And I can never know the pressures, daily, hourly, minute by minute pressures that people have to go through in order to just make a living and just get by in life there. Yeah. So I'm trying to do my best to allow them to speak above and beyond me.
Yes. So Matthew, we've got a couple of our people are asking what would be a good primer of Jerusalem so that they can get the foundation, and then they'll read your book and get the.
Crikey!
It's a tough one, isn't it?
That is a tough one. Oddly, one way in is through poetry. Tamim Baruti is a famous Palestinian poet who has written about Jerusalem. Mahmoud Darwish, obviously another famous Palestinian poet, has written about Jerusalem. Artistic writing, creative writing in that sense, gets under the skin of Jerusalem in a better way than guidebooks and histories tend to. But I would suggest follow those sorts of lines. Mahmoud Shukair is another Palestinian writer who's had a book called Jerusalem Stands Alone, translated into English quite recently in the last 2 or 3 years. That's another way in. There's a publisher in the US called Interlink, which is run by a guy called Michel Mouchabek, who is the grandson or great-grandson, I forget, of the man who used to lead the community of Greek Orthodox Christians in the Old City, who is also connected to the history of cultural activity and literary culture in Jerusalem. Many of the books that Interlink in the US puts out through Michel have a connection with Jerusalem as well.
We have a recommendation also from Lionel Sauvage, one of our board members, who says there's a book by Camille Asali. It's one of the best books on the history of Jerusalem.
The book by Asali is behind me on that bookshelf over there.
One other thing I wanted to mention about Hagop Karakashian and his family is that he's the 3rd generation of artists. His daughter is now a 4th generation artist, and she has begun to do tile work in restaurants, more commercial.
Mm-hmm. He was very proud of his daughter's work. I saw him, I was there probably just about the same time as you were, 2019, just before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And he said his daughter at that stage was 17, I think, so she may be 19 by now.
Wow.
But I think she got her first commission. I think she has a piece exhibited in public in the old city now that wasn't there a couple of years ago. So yeah, absolutely. Passing that flame on to the next generation was a driving force for Hagop, and you can understand why as well with that backdrop behind him as well.
A question from Cyrus Copeland here. You mentioned the Austrian Hospice.
Yep.
Is that an affordable place to stay for a couple of months? If somebody wanted to go and hunker down, if someone wanted to go and hunker down, maybe write?
Sure. Affordable is a relative term. So, you know, what I would say, I don't know whether it would count as affordable. It depends obviously on your budget, but it's certainly a comfortable place to stay. I write about it in my book as well. It's a slightly odd place. It's a feeling of, quite deliberately, because that was the way it was built. It's walled. So a lot of Jerusalem, especially the old city, is about walls and walls within walls and walls within further walls. The Austrian Hospice is walled, and you feel when you're in there that you are separated, which can be a source of comfort. It can also, obviously, there's a negative and a positive to that as well. But it's certainly very comfortable. And if you're looking for good coffee and nice cake, it's a nice place.
Definitely. But what about the YMCA? That's a great legacy of reaching out across cultural boundaries, welcoming.
That's absolutely so. That's just outside the walls. Just up the road from the Austrian Hospice, there's a convent at the Ecce Homo, which is an originally Roman arch across the street, which was just opposite the first station and beside the second station of the cross. That convent there takes paying guests. You can find them online as well. That's a lovely place to stay. Very basic, very simple, very quiet. I loved it.
Matthew, any final words before I wrap us up?
I would just repeat it again. If you do buy this book, I would love it if you did, obviously. I wrote it in order to try and redress the imbalance that I see in my culture, in English-speaking culture from the West, in narratives and stories about Jerusalem. In order to act, in order to have an equitable result, if you like, in order to create a balance, what I did was I acted unequally. So I favored the voices in the old city who, as I said, have not been listened to up to this point. So if you do buy it, I hope that it brings a new way of thinking about Jerusalem to people who are visiting and looking in from the outside.
Thank you. It comes out March 17th of this coming year, 2022. And I am Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. We wish you a happy holiday and a very happy new year.